Can I just ask you, to explain what you said yourself? There is no answer for this conduct. What do you exactly mean by that?
Look, by the time we will finish this interview, another baby will be killed in Gaza. By the time that you will finish your show, there will be another 2 women killed in Gaza. How long can this last? Israel had the full right to go for this campaign, for this war, but there must be limits, and we crossed them so long time ago. But above all, answering your question, where do we aim to? What will it be any better for Israel's security if another 20,000 Palestinians will be killed in Gaza? If another 500,000 people will lose their homes? What does this contribute for the security of Israel? We have to realize that the goals that Israel had declared are unachievable, or at least partly unachievable. And we should concentrate now about creating a new reality and not killing and killing for the purpose of killing.
Gideon, I want to get into that in a moment, but to answer and to illustrate what you just said about more babies, more women being killed, there is the latest, and we have to say, graphic video that's coming in from Gaza today, resulting from airstrikes last night. The hospital at Al-Aqsa there in Gaza says 57 people were killed, nearly 70 injured, at least 10 of those were children, the hospital says. So the government keeps saying they're doing their best to avoid civilian death. The US keeps doing a shuttle diplomacy which seems principally aimed at minimizing civilian deaths. Not only that, but also to minimize the chance of an expanded war. But in your mind, having covered so many of these Israel-Gaza wars, what is the point, what is the purpose 3 months in of this, as you put it, very heavy death toll? What is the strategic point?
I doubt very much if there is one. First of all, everyone is paying his lip service. The Americans, the Israelis, they do their best. The Americans ask gently Israel to refrain from killing civilians. But the outcome is very clear. It is a bloodbath, and you cannot ignore it. The only one who ignores it is Israeli media, by the way, if you let me make a remark about them, because the Israelis are the only people in the world right now who are not exposed at all to what's going on in Gaza. Nothing. We were always laughing at the Russian TV covering the war in Ukraine. Ours is much worse, because here it is voluntarily. Nobody dictates us not to show the suffer and the punishment of Gaza, and Israelis are not exposed to it. But that's just a, by the way, remark. There are goals. The Prime Minister had declared them, namely releasing the hostages and crashing Hamas. After 3 months, I can tell you we are not getting closer to both of them. I think about the releasing the hostages, which from my point of view must be in first priority, and they don't go together. I think that here we are going farther and farther. We are much more distant now than a few weeks ago from releasing the hostages, and this should bother any person who is conscious.
Can I ask you about expanding the war, because that also is a matter of great concern, especially to the surrounding nations and to the United States and its allies, basically Israel's strongest allies. As you very well know, but I'll just remind everybody what's been happening, the assassination of the deputy Hamas leader in Beirut this past week, the killing of a Hezbollah leader in South Lebanon, one of which has been claimed by Israel, that one. Then, there have been Hezbollah response in terms of targeting important Israeli targets inside Israel. And Alon Pinkas, who, as you very well know, a fellow columnist at Haaretz, but also a former Israeli consul general in New York, wrote this. He basically said, Israel seems resigned to the idea, in other words, actually wanting a bigger war. So much so that a Washington Post article quoted U.S. officials expressing alarm and estimating that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is encouraging escalation as a key to his political survival, and further distancing himself from responsibility for the October 7th debacle. you know, that is an incredibly damning thing for an actual Israeli former government official to say, that any country would want an expanded war. Do you think there's any truth in that at all?
First of all, I can only guess and only hope that there is no truth in it. I think that expanding this war also toward the northern front, namely against Hezbollah, will be a game changer and will create a reality that Israelis and Israel never met before. We should be aware to it. It's very nice to talk here about expanding the war, but what can happen then, I think, is much beyond we ever saw in Israel, in Tel Aviv, in Jerusalem, in Haifa, and other places. Listen, I give Netanyahu more credit than most of my colleagues and friends in the way that I don't think that his personal ambitions are the only motivation which motivates him. I can't believe it. I'm sure that his personal motivation is part of his considerations. I'm sure that for him personally, expanding this war is the only outlet before elections, resignation, and inquiry. But to say that he does everything only to maintain and nothing else interests him, that's even too much for Netanyahu, I think. I hope I'm not wrong.
You have spent a lot of your career essentially going against the tribe, against the herd. You've been in the occupied West Bank a lot. You speak like this inside Israel and internationally on programs like this one. It must be very difficult for you, number one. And what is the reaction to the news you bring back from the occupied West Bank, for instance?
It is difficult, but believe me, to be a journalist in Gaza right now is so much more difficult. So it's really not for me to complain now when people are dying in Gaza. I'm really not the issue. It's not easy. In this war, it became even harder because my best friends, some of my best friends, and even family members changed their minds on the 7th of October. It's unbelievable what happened here. I mean, everything collapsed. All the values that people believed in collapsed only because of this barbaric attack, which was a barbaric attack, but shouldn't change any values. I'm really whistling in the darkness for many years. I'm used to it. I don't think I have much influence, but I know nothing but to tell what I think is my truth, and I don't see any other field that I would like to be active rather than telling the story of the occupation for so many years to those who don't want to hear and don't want to read and don't want to know. But by the end of the day, the occupation defines Israel more than any other thing. The apartheid defines the regime of Israel more than any other thing. And we cannot continue with this blindness. Israelis are living very self-content, happy about their lives, which are usually quite good, not in times of war, obviously. And they are not even curious to know what is happening half an hour away from our homes. And half an hour away from our homes, even before this horrible war, there is an inhuman reality which must come to its end one day. And as long as we'll continue with this blindness, we will never get to any good place. We Israelis.